Hi there, welcome to today's showcase. Today we have a couple different things to talk about, and today I'm really excited for, and I'm really excited to show you guys what I have today as well. However, as excited as I am, I understand what I'm about to show you is probably not that exciting for you, maybe. I get that, usually that's the case about this kind of stuff. And so I'm just warning you guys ahead of time. Today's going to be a really technical showcase, and there's still a lot you can see from it, but it's probably not going to be that prominent immediately. So, weigh it. You can check it out if you want. If not, no big deal. Anyway, I'm just going to get right into it, I think, because it's going to take a little bit to explain, and that's part of it. That's going to be a little bit technical in terms of description and everything, but I trust you guys will handle it. And as well as that, we also have some other stuff being done for art, and there's a ton of stuff I have to talk about with art, so stay tuned for that. That'll probably be towards the end, just because that's not actually showing anything off. So, what have I done? Well, I threw a huge fuss about this in Verdict Chat, so if you saw that, you probably already know something about it. I also showed off a GIF comparison, so you should check that out too, because it's a really striking comparison in my opinion. But apparently, to give you the kind of very basic rundown version of this, there is a function called step position, and there is a function called set position. I'm not going to go too much into detail about that. Basically, one of them checks collision, one of them doesn't, and one of them has a ton of bugs. I was using step position, and it's apparently deprecated, which means that you shouldn't be using it everywhere, and I was using it on things that don't even collide with things. I know that projectiles probably look like they collide with things, but they really don't. They're actually just doing these manual little checks when they cross over players. So they aren't actually colliding with anything, and I was using something that automatically checks for collision, which means that it's hundreds of times slower than set position. And originally I used them because I thought I would have to have collision for projectiles, but obviously that's not the case. So that's been fixed. So projectiles are, and I'm being 100% serious when I say 100 or more times efficient than they were before. And I'm going to show off the performance gains there in a moment. But until then, we also have a couple changes to how they collide with things. So previously, you might have noticed that they look kind of janky when they try to collide with something. So previously, what would happen is they would try to collide with something, and I was using a function on cross instead of on crossed. Lots of little tiny little areas like this, and on cross has to run all of its code before it can actually allow the projectile to hit the target, basically. So it would hold up, wait, and then go for like a fraction of a second, but it was very noticeable. It looked very weird. So I've changed that. Now it uses on cross, like I said, and now that's completely fixed. So there's no more hold up when it's trying to hit something, which is fantastic. I think I'm going to start showing them off because I don't want the entire 10 minutes, first 10 minutes of this to be me just talking about it, but trust in the fact that it is huge in terms of performance gains. There's a couple other things, not necessarily minor things. They're actually still pretty big, but they're not as huge as those, I should say. So, first of all, let me just state that cavitation was reworked again. It's not in a finished state yet, this rework iteration, but you probably get the gist of it. It's the same exact thing except a little bit burstier, and it doesn't form on top of you. It looked kind of weird forming on top of you. There's also a little bit of a transition from nothing to something, so it actually grows and forms instead of just popping into existence. So I'm going to go ahead and hit space. It's attached to space right now, and you can see just a tiny little, you can see that little animation, and it forms behind you now. I was actually working on a melee spell, and I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to go with that version of the melee spell I was working on for that iteration of it for the actual melee spell. But I figured out it worked pretty well for cavitation, so I figured I might as well adapt it. So you can see that little animation. There should be a little bit of a delay there, I think, so that they pause. Like I said, it's not in a finished state, but you can probably see what I mean, right, already. So if you've watched any of the other showcases, it's really apparent. I guarantee you, even if you guys aren't very code savvy, or even if you don't care about this very much, as long as you've seen what it does otherwise, it's pretty easy to tell. And there's another thing I want to talk about here in a second, but to put it in short, the big thing I've added this update, in addition to basically making everything in the game 100 million times more efficient, is making it even more efficient. So previously, just to put this basically, the biggest, most expensive thing you can do in game development of any kind in any game engine is creating or deleting objects. And previously, I was solely creating and deleting them. So if I wanted to make, these projectiles here, in order to do that, I would need to actually have it so that when I created those projectiles, it would have to create them from scratch. It would have to create new display objects, and then when they were done, it would have to get rid of them completely from the game. So this is not efficient at all. And what I've done is I've replaced this with an object pooling system, taken a lot of inspiration from Ashuri. And I understand you guys probably don't care about this, but I'm going to try to portray it as importantly as I can because it's a really important thing to know about. Basically what this does is, instead of making these things on command and deleting them on command, what I do is we have a quote-unquote pool, which is why it's called a pooling system. So instead of, or I guess in some languages it's called a cache, but whatever. Say that I want to, let's say I want to cast this spell, right? I want to create these 10 cavitation bubbles, right? Normally I would have to do that really expensive process of creating not just one, but 10 of these bubbles. Instead of having to do that, I can simply pull existing ones from the pool and then repurpose them. So I can put all the variables back again. You can see they're doing the proper amount of damage because I set them properly and everything. So functionally, they're actually the same bubbles. These bubbles that I'm casting right now, like when I hit this is the same bubble, or same bubbles, that have been casted every single time I've used cavitation this entire video. So it's repurposing existing bubbles, and that is to say, of course, that then we don't actually delete these bubbles either when they're done with, or when we're done with them, I should say. So to guide you through this step by step, we hit the button, it spawns or it grabs them from the pool, and then as they're hitting this, they aren't actually deleting because we can't just delete them willy-nilly, or rather return them to the pool in this case. Instead of just deleting them or returning them to the pool instantly, it waits for all of them to hit, and then it returns all of them to the pool at the same time. That removes all risk of lag with these, so there's no chance that they lag, at least not because of that, not because of deleting while it's currently in motion or whatever, or deleting other things. It's kind of hard to explain without going into the code, so I'm just going to kind of gloss over it. But anyway, that's really important, so I did that, and whenever it's sent back to the pool, it's always readily available. So this entire showcase, I've only generated 10 cavitation bubbles, which is fantastic for resources as well as for garbage collection. So it's just universally far, far better, and he's dead, than the alternative, which is obviously what I'm going for. That's really, really good. And I hope you're still here. I understand that it's not exactly the most the most showy showcase, no pun intended, but that is huge. I cannot overstate to you guys how massive these changes are. To give you an idea, previously when I would cast cavitation, not only was it stuttery, wobbly, and weird, it would also actually drop my FPS by 15 to 20. Depending. I mean, if it was a bad one, it could be 15 to 20. Usually it wasn't that bad, but it could easily get there. Now, I mean, I'll hit it once. You see, not even a single FPS dropped, right? I can probably hit this like a couple times. Yep, not even a single FPS dropped. That is insane. That is literally 30 or 40 bubbles compared to 8 previously that are now not causing lag at all. It is incredibly powerful, and I've actually tested it with 80 projectiles on screen, producing and deleting 40 a second. That's not with a new pooling system either. That is literally creating and deleting 40 brand new and then 40 old projectiles every single second without FPS dropped more than 2 or 3. That is insanely good compared to what it was before. And it wasn't terrible before, but to see that kind of improvement is crazy. And the biggest part of this is that it's really supportive for the future in terms of supporting players, right? Because we can support, obviously cavitation is one of the most expensive spells in the game in terms of performancy. Thus, having that kind of performance upgrade means that we can support, hundreds more players. If we, only consider cavitation to be what they're ever going to use, that is several hundred more players that we could support in that scenario. Obviously, that's not how it works exactly, but you get the gist. It's really promising, and I'm gonna go ahead and grab Whirlwind too, because Whirlwind is another one of the spells that I've supported for this. So Whirlwind has been adjusted a little bit. It's a little bit tighter now, a little bit smaller, and also when it deletes or when it finishes, it deletes all at the same time. That's also part of the thing where I have to. The big downside to the object, actually it's not even a downside to the object pooling system, it's just something I needed to do in general. Rather than deleting things one by one, we should really be deleting them all together in terms of these spells that cause waves of projectiles like Cavitation or Whirlwind. Because if these, I contain them in an array, and that's how I reference them. So if we have 10 tornadoes, right, we have 10 tornadoes, and I delete one of those tornadoes while the other 9 are still moving, it causes it to lag out and kind of stutter. So if you guys have seen that, that's why it's happening, and it's very frustrating. So I'm starting to go through the lengths to prevent that, and object pooling is one of the steps. So that's cool, and I think we're already there. I just have to reformat the other spells that use stuff like that, like Missile Flurry and stuff. So, if you guys are still here, I really appreciate that. It's very nice to see that you guys care about this kind of stuff. Again, the reason I'm putting so much time in the showcase into it, even though it's not a code showcase, is just because of how crazy this is. Like, normally I understand you guys can feel my excitement, so I'm trying to portray that as best as I can. This is genuinely one of the biggest performance upgrades I have ever done for this game. And when I say that, I mean like I could literally put a while loop just staggering the entire server down to a slow crawl and then remove that, and that is less of a performance upgrade than this was overall. It is obscene, and especially because it only took an hour or two to implement. So I mean, initially, of course, I had to spend a bunch more time refining it, but you get the idea. It's really cool to see that we're making strides like that, I guess, and it's really easing my nerves about having 200, 300 people connected on launch. So I hope you guys feel my excitement on that one. I understand it was a little bit tough probably sitting through me ramble about random stuff that you might not understand, but trust me in that it's a really good thing. I'm really excited about it. So I did say that there's art, and I can't show it today's showcase. I really apologize about that. However, it's just not finished yet. The big thing overall is first spells. So we got a new spell artist, and I know I've said that before, but this time this guy is actually really professional. I really like him a lot, and he's actually very courteous about replying, and he lets me know what's going on constantly. He's a lot like Howl in terms of his courteousness and everything. So I'm a big fan of his. He has a style very similar to Duelist, if you've ever seen that game. He's actually best friends with 2 of the main artists for characters and spells on Duelist. Or 2 of the freelance artists, I should say. So he has a very similar style, which I'm a huge fan of. And he's working on 2 melee spells, a racial spell, and a wind spell, because we're kind of low on wind spells. So once those are done, we're going to have 4 more spells, and I am going to work on having a poll for the melee stuff. So I have 3 more mock-up weapons coming after the 3 I already had done, and I'm going to put up a poll on the Patreon asking about which ones you guys want to see, and then we're going to get spells done for all of those. So that's that. And then in addition to that, we are still getting the mobs animated. So we have the crawler, which is the 3rd one I think I mentioned last showcase that we're getting animated, and after that we are also actually going to get the base redone. So I think a lot of people are going to be happy about that. And you know what? I can see the issues with the base. I totally understand it and I get it, but it's an expensive asset to change. I was reassured by some of the Patreon supporters that if I did need more money for it, they would be allowed, or they could, support that, which is a reassurance because I understand that people want to see the base differently, and I get that. But you have to understand it is an immensely expensive change depending on what I get done. And it could easily cost anywhere up to a couple $1,000s if I decide to change the entire base, right? If I change the head shape, we have to get all of the hairs redone or adjusted. If I change the body shape, we have to get all of the spells in the game readjusted to manage it. If we get, something in particular redone, then we have to adjust all of this different stuff. It is literally probably half a dozen man-hours for me alone, let alone for the artists and everything else. So that is a ton of work, and it just costs a lot of money. But I have some ideas, and if you guys want, you can kind of cut out now. It's not a big deal, but to let you know, to keep you updated, basically, I'm thinking about using a character rigger for the animation of the player sprite. And I understand a lot of people prefer hand animation because it's actually just better, and that's not something that can be disproven. It's literally just always better. I mean, if you have a really good hand-drawn artist versus a really good rigger, the quality of the animation itself is probably always going to be the hand-drawn animator. However, the hand-drawn animation is going to take hundreds of times longer than the rigger, or the rigged animation. But that's not really even the reason I'm doing this, right? I don't care about spending maybe $500 on a really good 50 frame base, right? I don't mind about that. The issue is, for me, getting clothing done. Clothing, in terms of gloves, you have chest pieces, legs, feet, shoulder pads, everything else. In order to get this done, it is 50 frames, and that might take maybe 5 hours per piece or something like that, which isn't too bad. But when you're talking about 5 hours for potentially dozens or hundreds of items, you're literally shedding money. Like, I've basically slit my arm open and I'm bleeding money out at that point. And I started to realize this because when people ask for outfits, I really want to be able to provide that, but ultimately it comes down to can I even afford that? And for a lot of artists who are only $15 to $20 an hour, it's not that bad. But I want to have quality animation for my outfits and everything. So what I'm thinking, and the reason I'm thinking about rigged animation, is I want to rig this player base, this little boy on the screen right here, and I want to have it touched up first. So I want to have it redone in a sense. Basically, I want to have the feet shrunken because that's something everyone. Basically, the proportions. I want to have the proportions redone, as well as the animations. I want to have those redone, obviously. And then we're gonna split them up into a bunch of different component pieces, and then we're gonna hook him up to some bones and a rig, and then I'm gonna have him animated. So he's gonna have 4 directions, same as now. It's really just gonna be the same thing, except it's not gonna be hand animated. And then that way, we can just plug in 4 directions of clothing in those different for those different pieces, and then it outputs a spreadsheet, or not a spreadsheet, a sprite sheet. Sorry. So that cuts down the amount of time it takes to make outfits, literally hundreds by hundreds, right? So that seems like a no-brainer to me, because even though we might lose a little bit of quality by not having hand-animated stuff for the player base, we are gaining a crazy amount of value out of not having to pay $1 million for each outfit. And that way I can actually keep it as sort of a Patreon reward that stays consistent, rather than something that's oh well, we don't have enough money this month to do a new outfit or something. I'm sorry about that. So I think that that's a little bit more sensible. I hope you guys understand about that, and I think generally speaking it'll just be better, because I mean our current base isn't that bad, but the animators that have worked on it aren't really top tier, because I was using Fiverr at the time instead of actually going out and finding freelance artists. So ultimately speaking, I think we'll still get better quality animation, even though, like I said, typically rigged animation is worse than equal quality hand animation, if that kind of makes sense. So it'll be better animation, even if rigged animation tends to be worse than hand-drawn animation. So yeah, and we have enough money to do that because of our fantastic Patreon supporters like Pope and a couple other people. So really excited about all that stuff. I'm personally really excited because half of that is me. Half of the performance upgrades and everything is something I've done, whereas all the icon upgrades, those, I mean, it's really stressful, let me tell you, talking to 7 different artists at the same time. Not necessarily 7, it's more like 3, but you get what I mean. But regardless of that fact, I'm really excited to be able to have that opportunity to improve everything that we have so far, and to be able to improve it so massively too. So I hope you guys share my excitement in that. I'm, not one to usually do these talking showcases because I want to keep it professional and I want to keep it exciting. But I think today is already pretty exciting for me. I've been super hype about it. So, feel free to ask me about it. I love explaining it because it's such a cool solution that I found, and it's a very simple one. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys look forward to everything that's coming, including the beta hopefully soon once we get these outfits done, and in particular the base redesign, and the next showcase as well. So, yeah, have a good day.